Minister said you have declared effectively war on North Korea, and the North Korean government has threatened to shoot down or aim at American planes flying in international airspace. I'd like your reaction.
Okay, well, I'll answer the second one first. We are totally prepared for the second option, not a preferred option. But if we take that option, it will be devastating. I can tell you that. Devastating for North Korea. That's called the military option. If we have to take it, we will. He's acting very badly. He's saying things that should never, ever be said. And we're replying to those things, but it's a reply. It's not an original statement, it's a reply. But the things that he said over the last year, and if you look back, the things that he said to past administrations, North Korea is a situation that should have been handled 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and it could have been handled much more easily. You had various administrations, many administrations, which left me a mess, but I'll fix the mess. So we'll see what happens with North Korea.
Ri Yong-ho addressed reporters.
Last weekend, Trump claimed that our leadership wouldn't be around much longer, and hence at last he declared a war on our country. Given the fact that this comes from someone who is currently holding the seat of the United States presidency, this is clearly a declaration of war.
His latest comments go further than his address to the UN General Assembly just 2 days earlier, and he was clearly responding to President Trump's tweet after that speech, in which he referred to little rocket men and warned they may not be around much longer. But the White House dismissed his suggestion it was a declaration of war.
We've not declared war on North Korea, and frankly, the suggestion of that is absurd.
Ri also referred to a U.S. show of force which took place just before he spoke on Saturday. U.S. fighter jets and B-1 bombers flying close to North Korea's eastern coast, but still over international waters.
Since the U.S. declared war on our country, we will have every right to make countermeasures, including the right to shoot down the United States strategic bombers, even when they're not yet inside the airspace of our country.
It's never appropriate for a country to shoot down another country's aircraft when it's over international waters. Our goal is still the same. We continue to seek the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
In a briefing to South Korea's Parliamentary Intelligence Committee, the National Intelligence Service said North Korea did not take any countermeasures in response to that flight of U.S. bombers, but has since moved planes and beefed up defenses along the east coast. It said the U.S. military disclosed the flight path because the North Koreans apparently didn't detect the aircraft. And what is the use of a show of force if the target doesn't realize it's happening?
South Korea is putting a strong emphasis on a peaceful solution.
There cannot be another outbreak of war on the Korean Peninsula. The consequences would be devastating not just for the Korean Peninsula, but for Northeast Asia and indeed the whole international community.
South Korean intelligence reports that soldiers on the opposite side of the border have been ordered to report to higher commands before taking any action, suggesting that despite its tough talk, North Korea would also prefer to avoid confrontation.
Talk to you about the escalation of the war of words between the dictator of North Korea and the President of the United States. What is the most effective way to neutralize the threats that seem to come from North Korea? And does the verbiage that President Trump is being used make matters worse or make them seem worse?
I think the way President Trump is approaching the threat, I think, has the potential to make things worse, absolutely.
How so?
In the sense that, for example, the latest story we saw today where Kim Jong-un is saying, he's insisting that the latest from President Trump actually escalates this situation into a war. What we have, when you're dealing with an irrational actor, as I believe Kim Jong-un is, irrational not in the political science-y sense of the word, but irrational in the sense that you truly don't know what he may or may not do. You don't know that he will always act in his own interests, even. The Trump strategy is risky. I think it may pay dividends. It's too early to tell.
Okay.
It's definitely a major departure from...
I don't want you to tell me of secrets that you know about that you can't reveal, but is this guy...
Because then I'd have to kill you.
Right. But what about all the people watching? Is this guy, Kim Jong-un, the serious threat that the president would have us believe he is? Can they really deliver destructive military material to the United States of America?
They have demonstrated the capability of doing this, which is different than actually doing it, in the sense that nuclear threats remain threats until they are executed, right?
Right.
We believe that theoretically they have or are very close to having the capability to deliver a nuclear weapon somewhere akin to the United States on a world map.
Right.
Because of that, I think no matter who Kim Jong-un is and no matter what kind of pop psychology analysis we hear about him, the threat has to be taken seriously. And it has been taken seriously by the last 4 presidents of the United States.
Okay, if you had Donald Trump's ear the way you did 2 of his predecessors, would you have advised against the bellicose rhetoric at the UN, and particularly the reference to Kim Jong-un as Rocket Man, or would you have advised that the president just go with his heart and say what he wants?
It's a hard question to ask. I would put it this way. If I was an advisor to him, as I am right now, I would have advised against this rhetoric, because I would have felt that it potentially becomes too risky. It potentially risks escalating the situation unnecessarily. But that said, if we look at how President Obama and President Bush before him and President Clinton before him handled the threat, we didn't have a lot of... when I say we, I mean the United States. The United States managed to stave off a certain degree of nuclear development. It managed to stave off military escalations with North Korea, but what we didn't manage to get them to do is to completely stand down. And part of me feels open to the idea that if you match the bellicose rhetoric with bellicose rhetoric, maybe that will have a stand-down effect at some point.
Trump administration says North Korea's claim the U.S. declared war is absurd and emphasized Washington is still seeking a peaceful means to resolve the issue. Meanwhile, the regime's foreign minister said Trump's harsh words gave it the right to shoot down American planes. Connie Kim zooms in on the 2 sides' ongoing heated back and forth.
The verbal exchange between the U.S. and North Korea has reached a new high, with North Korea's foreign minister accusing U.S. President Donald Trump of declaring war on the regime during a rare press conference in New York on Monday, local time.
Trump ultimately declared war on us last weekend by claiming again that our leadership won't be around much longer. Given that this comes from an incumbent American president, this is clearly a declaration of war.
Lee Yong-ho's statement took aim at Trump's tweet message that came following his speech at the UN. The North Korean diplomat also warned of taking countermeasures, coming on the heels of Washington's disclosure that its B-1B bombers flew just off North Korea's coast.
Since the U.S. has clearly declared war on us, we have every right to take countermeasures. That includes the right to shoot down their strategic bombers at a time of our discretion, even if they're not in our airspace. We will see then who lasts longer.
Washington hit back, dismissing the claims as absurd.
We've not declared war on North Korea, and frankly, the suggestion of that is absurd. It's never appropriate for a country to shoot down another country's aircraft when it's over international waters. Our goal is still the same. We continue to seek the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
The ongoing war of words does not seem to be reaching a conclusion anytime soon, and concerns are rising of additional provocations by North Korea.
In that regard, I would say that North Korea is probably thinking carefully about what next step to take. North Korea will have to calibrate very carefully not to overstep the red line that could be invite American retaliation against North Korea.
Some experts are pointing at a possible test launch of an ICBM as Pyongyang's next provocation. But whether the regime will go as far as detonating a nuclear-tipped missile over the Pacific Ocean, an option Lee said Kim Jong-un was considering, is yet to be seen as a possibility, for the stakes may be too high for the reclusive regime.
The minister said you have declared effectively war on North Korea, and the North Korean government has threatened to shoot down or aim at American planes flying in international airspace. I'd like your reaction.
Okay, well, I'll answer the second one first. We are totally prepared for the second option, not a preferred option. But if we take that option, it will be devastating, I can tell you that, devastating for North Korea. That's called the military option. If we have to take it, we will. He's acting very badly. He's saying things that should never, ever be said. And North Korea is a situation that should have been handled 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and it could have been handled much more easily. You had various administrations, and we're replying to those things, but it's a reply. It's not an original statement, it's a reply. But the things that he said over the last year, and if you look back, the things that he said to past administrations,